Okay, thanks to Kara. So now I'm going to introduce to you our next speaker, Carrera. She is a mental health and suicide prevention educator, advocate, speaker, and clinician with 20 years experience in the human services field. She serves on the Massachusetts Board of Directors for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention and on the executive committee for her local suicide prevention coalition. She lost her 15-year-old son, Nathan, to suicide in March of 2018 and has since focused her work and advocacy to awareness and creates opportunities for critical conversations, much just like we heard from Kara, and system changes in schools and communities in Western Massachusetts and Southern Vermont. So with that, I would like to welcome you, Kara, and everybody else drop in that chat. Hello.
Good morning, Peggy. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. And I really do appreciate having you. So Karen and I are going to have more of a conversation today. And if you have questions that pop in there for her as well, go ahead and do that. So we're going to start with just having you tell us a little bit more about your journey and the loss of your son, Nathan.
Sure. And thank you for putting all this together. It's nice to have a place to come together with like minds and share ideas to help ourselves and help others. So as you mentioned in my introduction, I've been in the mental health field and have worked as a clinician in various settings for a long time. And have had the pleasure of having two wonderful children, and Nathan was my oldest, and I have a daughter, Natalie, who is about 3 years younger than him. And there was a few speakers yesterday who talked about identifying depression in younger children. I think one of your speakers talked about their 6-year-old, and that the presentation of littles and often be overlooked, misunderstood, where primary care people really don't go to mental health concerns at that young age. So in hindsight, when I look back, yeah, I do feel like Nathan was definitely a very sensitive soul. He felt feelings deeply. And in parallel to that process, he had a life-threatening food allergy. And so since he was, 1.5, we figured that out. He lived every day being fearful of death, and the things that, nurture you the most, good food, was an obstacle for him, and in us finding, what could help him, keep him alive, how to navigate that system. And so the pressures of that and whatever else was in the combination for him, as he grew older, I was seeing more fluctuation in mood, and that kind of thing. In addition to all that, he was funny, so handsome, very tall, excellent ski racer. We live in New England, so we ski out of a mountain in Vermont, and every weekend since the kids were little, like 2, we would go and ski, and he'd be a part of the team, and very, very popular in that kind of way. The weekend that he passed, we actually went to, I think it was Waterville Valley, and he raced the best he's ever raced in his life, in his whole career, like top 5, and was smiling on that Sunday. And so, his process of things raising to a concerning point started his freshman year in high school, and keeping up with classes, keeping up with social expectations, keeping up with friend groups, keeping up with just every day started to get harder and harder for him. And I knew he was sad, and he did talk about not wanting to be here. And I did activate every resource and every option I knew at that time. 3.5 years later, I know so much more today than I did then, even as a clinician, which brings a whole nother level of irony to this conversation. But we worked hard to get him what we thought would be helpful for him. And, I don't have the answers of why, we never will. But the pain was too much for him. And that Sunday evening, I do believe it was early morning, he took his life. And since then, we have worked as a family to really figure out what the meaning in all of that was. Why was he gifted to me? Why did we take this journey together? What have I learned as a parent, as a clinician, as just a human? What can I help others learn through that experience? And this is why I do this. I share this story. I have jumped really deep into suicide prevention and the advocacy work around that, and very happy to be able to share my story with everyone here this morning.
Wow, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So what was the biggest challenges then that you have faced since Nathan has passed? You, your family, what has been the hardest for you?
Well, I go back to that question, ever pending question of why, trying to figure out and the tyranny of hindsight, right? What didn't I do? How could I have made things better? And I learned and decided quickly that staying in that area and in that kind of mindset wasn't going to bring him back, and it was only going to increase my pain and my stagnation and moving forward and finding the healing pieces of it. I think the stigma of suicide and the difficulty of friends and family and community members being able to acknowledge that he did die by suicide and that mental health is a concern has been one area of challenge, one that we as a family have not stepped back from. We made it a decision early on that we would not feel shame, that we would not hide from the reality of what happened. And what we would do is celebrate the 15 years that we had with him, and that we would use that leverage and that energy to help others, to advocate, to make some change, to figure out, where were the loopholes and can we fill them so that another family doesn't feel the way that we do. I also have Nathan's sister who, parenting a child loss survivor is a challenge in its own. And I think you could have a whole nother conference day about that topic.
For the siblings, absolutely. Yeah. I want to ask you a little bit, something that you mentioned is that why. So just wrapping this all up into one big question and answer it to the best. So as a suicide loss survivor myself, that why seems to be that biggest question. And so have you feel like you have answered the why? And what would you advise for those people that are trying to find that answer? What would you tell them?
Sure, great question. Have I answered the why? I don't think I have fully answered the why. I don't think I ever will fully answer the why, but within that process, I have figured out my why I do the work I do, why I tell his story and say his name every day, and why I contribute to wanting to make the world a better place for those around me. So I'll go to finding meaning. And that's really something that has resonated with me in the last 3.5 years. And you can connect it to the grief cycle, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's, 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. And then David Kessler's work on finding meaning. And David and Elizabeth worked together in their books. And after she passed, he worked further on developing the process of finding meaning. And in that finding meaning, I think that there's reconciliation with the idea of why me, why him, why this, why now. And so I embarked on that journey pretty quickly after he passed.
Don't you feel that with that, finding that your meaning, it's making a choice and making a decision in what you do with what you've been handed now?
Absolutely. Yeah. And we know that the grief stages of grief is not a linear process. You can float in and out of them and experience them all at the same time. Your grief journey is individual to you. And so the finding meaning piece, he connects it to acceptance. And I feel, for whatever reason, and I don't know if it was the hardships of coming to terms with, his food allergy as a young kid. Like, I knew that there was a risk every single day, every meal he ate, that I wouldn't have him. And so that mindset was there for me earlier. So the acceptance of him passing, I don't feel like I struggled as much with that as maybe some anger, maybe some bargaining, depression for sure. And in and out of all of those things, I found, what am I going to do? What actions can I take? What can I, what is in my control? Frankly, I can't control that happened. I can't bring him back. But what is in my control? And I asked myself those questions. And then I thought about passion and purpose, and that coming towards finding meaning. And so my entire life, passions for me have been working in a healthcare profession. I have been a clinician forever, we mentioned earlier. Advocacy, being a voice for people who don't necessarily have the strength in their voice. Creating and building new things, that has always been a passion. And music has been a passion for me. And so I took all of that, and then I looked at purpose. And the purpose for me was to heal, to help my daughter, to help my family, to honor him, to not forget that he was a part of us, and to cherish those 15 years as a gift, and to move into a place of figuring out how to live with the grief that we were given. And I think, for me, I took all of those things. I cast a broad net, into all the organizations around. So I found AFSP. I found my local coalitions. In Southern Vermont, we have an endowment in Nathan's name, and we're connected with some of the healthcare centers in that area to bring programming, to bring suicide prevention, to bring mental health awareness to youth and families in that area. And in all that work, that keeps me connected to Nathan. It keeps me feeling like I have a hope and purpose to help someone else in his name, in his memory. And it really has softened the layers of grief that that will be a part of my life forever.
Yeah. Wow, Karen, what a way to honor your son is to be able to take this tragedy and wrap it up into your purpose of the things that you were already doing, taking that experience of being a mental health professional and now narrowing it down to a little bit more to suicide, because you've now experienced that. And I honestly believe that those who have experienced this are so well equipped now to help others. And so I want to thank you for being able to wrap that, and that you've embraced it. We don't like what we've been handed, but we do have that decision. We have a choice what we do with what has been handed to us. And that choice could be either to crawl up on the couch and stay there and pull the covers over our head and never come out, or that you can embrace it. And I'm not saying that you have to fake it. It's just that you embrace it and walk through this journey. So thank you. So if you were to take and talk about like one thing that you've learned in this whole process, what would that be? See if you can narrow it down to one.
That is a challenge for sure.
Okay.
I mean,
give me a couple, Ann.
I've had an education of a lifetime in the last 3.5 years, for sure.
Absolutely. I was gonna say, don't we find that we educate and learn so much more and understand it? And that is part of the process. And educating and learning, that we can now go, okay, I've learned this and it's helping me to understand and accept that this has happened.
Yeah. And I want to share something really quick, because I don't expect, like, I am this odd unicorn who just loves to throw myself into all things. So I've been trained in a bunch of different, QPR, the alert, the mental health first aid, all the AFSP Talk Saves Lives programs. So I threw myself into that. I've read 100 books in the last, 2 or 3 years. I don't expect that. I think that's a little bit of a unicorn experience, but that's me. And so it's really gauging it from where you come from, right? And learning from others. So in the quest for finding out why, I decided to think and listen to and understand other people's experiences. And that was super helpful. So, we talked about finding a trusted adult or a point person, or, a friend that you can listen and talk to. And I found that even my bestest of friends really had a hard time making the connection to the extreme experience that I'm living through. And so finding people with lived experience, finding, suicide prevention, like-minded people, or grief support groups, or being a part of this, that, or the other, where you can look at someone across the table and you in their eyes, that they understand exactly what you are going through and what you feel. There's something very special and unique in that. And I encourage everyone who's listening today to look into that if you haven't found that yet. There's a comfort in that that's hard to describe, but it's uniquely real.
And Karen, that is so true, to the point that finding people that it's a unique experience and that others can relate to. So
absolutely.
Absolutely, and finding somebody. And I want to ask you a question, one that's popped up in the chat box here. So, sure. So somebody, Diana, is asking about first holidays without her son. If you have, we've just gone through Thanksgiving, Christmas is coming up shortly. So if you can give her, some tips, we can.
Absolutely.
And as I say, because my son passed away December 14th, 3 years ago. So we're about 6 months apart in that. And so having experienced that loss right before Christmas, that was quite the challenge. But why don't you give us, and we can talk a little bit about getting through that first holiday.
Sure.
That whole series.
Before I say that, I also wanted to add just a little bit to my last statement. Like, listening to other people's stories is really important. And in the time where Nathan passed, Hamilton was like the big deal at that point. And then it came out on Disney Plus, whatever. But if I decided to look at Eliza Hamilton's life, and Eliza Hamilton lost her son, lost her husband, lived through the war, you lived through yellow fever, went on to live till in her late 90s, which was unheard of at that time. And how did she survive? She survived. She built and created the first orphanage in the United States. And so her purpose, she lived 30 plus years without most of her family members by engaging in a passion and a purpose she had, and left a legacy behind. And, that kind of stuff inspires me. And so listening to stories and reading stories of people who have these experiences can give you a perspective of where you might take steps in the future. In terms of holidays, it's hard. The winter is one of our family's favorite months. We're a ski family. So any change of season that comes, as soon as the air gets cooler in the fall, it's gearing up for yet another season, another ski season without Nathan. His favorite thing to do, his favorite place on earth was on the snow. So we still go to that mountain. We still do that activity. And what have we made it, has made it better for the holidays? We have a tree there. The mountain and the foundation that we're a part of has this, they call it Snowlight in Vermont. And families, individuals are, have the opportunity to sponsor a tree, and that they light it throughout the village. And we have done that for Nathan that first Christmas in particular. And it's funny I'm talking to you all in Denver because Nathan loved the Denver Broncos. We live in New England, and that's not a good thing, but he loved
the Broncos.
that.
Hey, the Broncos win all the time. Come on, Karen.
That's right. He wore his Peyton Manning jersey. He was so excited when the Broncos beat the Patriots, that Super Bowl. He has his hat and all that kind of thing. So his friends decided his color would be orange. And so that tree, every year, it's a tree, it has lights on it, but it has an orange bow. I get a huge orange bow, like as big as my hair, and I put it on the top of that tree, and all of his friends walking through know that that's Nathan's tree. Natalie, my husband, and I walk through, we know that that's Nathan's tree, and his spirit is still a part of the mountain, of the ski teams, of the ski family that we had up there. We do a similar thing here back home. Another thing that I've done for the holidays is, because I was gifted with 2 children, I have for a long time given back to either foster families or other, agencies who are looking to sponsor a child for the holidays, who have fallen on, hard times or whatever. So I still do that, and I do that with a special twist in Nathan's name and memory, just to give back. Nathan loved oatmeal cookies. That was his favorite. And him and I had this food connection because I was the one who was responsible for keeping him safe. So we had this dance around food. He loved mashed potatoes, he loved beef stew, and he loved oatmeal cookies. And so I make them. I don't make them throughout the year like I used to, because sometimes it's too hard to do that. But for the holidays or for a special occasion, or if I just need a little extra hug from him, I'll make an oatmeal cookie. Actually, I'm thinking about making them this afternoon. So, it just keeps that memory, a special something that you've had with your loved one, with you. We set an extra plate at the table for him. We say his name every day, and holidays are hard, but every day is hard. And so if you get yourself in the habit of saying their name, of keeping their spirit with you on a regular basis, getting through like the high expectation times, it is a little bit easier, or I find that at least.
Absolutely. And, I want to just build upon that, saying their name is, as you get to know more of my story, but to be able to acknowledge them and keep their memory alive without it becoming that elephant in the room where you don't speak about them. And because we really miss them at the holidays, and wanting to be able to speak about them feels so awkward if you haven't been speaking about them the days, the weeks, and just throughout your life. So you want to reduce that awkwardness, and setting the extra plate, doing things in memory of your loved one. And one of the big things I advise people to do is to plan and think about it. You know that Christmas comes out every 365 days. You know that their birthday comes. You know that their angelversary comes. And being prepared for it and thinking about what you might want to do, I think, is such a big help. And okay, Christmas, do you want to think about it and go, do we want to do the same things differently? Or do we want to do the same things? We want to do things differently. Do we want to celebrate? Instead of having Christmas dinner, do we want to go skiing? Or do I want to have, Connor's favorite was macaroni and cheese. So I'd have macaroni and cheese and my traditional ham, so planning about it, and you can plan it. And then also, if you feel comfortable and those others feel comfortable, draw them in on that planning process.
Yeah, and your efforts don't have to be an act on Congress. I mean, I think that's important. It doesn't have to be these grand gestures that impress, the whole neighborhood. It's about you, and it's about finding that healing moment. So making a cookie, having your decoration colors be a favorite color of your loved one, planting a flower in their memory that you nurture and you grow year after year. When I have a few here, and when they bloom, it brings me so much peace and joy. And then I see the butterflies and the dragonflies around those flowers. There's just something comforting that keeps that connection alive, and it keeps it there. And it doesn't take away the pain. It doesn't take away your grief. It helps make it different. It helps make it more manageable. And it goes back to what is your, ask yourself what your passion is. What are things that are important to you, or that relationship that you have had with your loved one, and bring that into your day to day. And for me, that absolutely does soften the edges.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. So, Karen, how would anybody get in touch with you, or what do you specialize in helping others in navigating this grief? And because you have given us a ton of valuable information, great perspective here. So how would they get in touch if they wanted to connect with you on a one-to-one basis?
I'll put my email in the chat box in a second. And, I'm on the East Coast, so I'm involved with AFSP Massachusetts, and I'm doing a lot of, advocacy work. So, I guess email would be the best way. And then we do lots of trainings here on this side of the world too. So, if people are close, and thank goodness with Zoom, like we all connected today across the country and in Canada. So, that's fantastic that we have this tool, and happy to be in a conversation, offer tips and tricks, steer people in directions that have helped me. Just glad to be a part of this. And I wish everyone peace, and to find a little bit of the softer edges as you go through the next couple of weeks.